Hello, everybody. Happy Monday. I'm not in school today. Maybe you've guessed that by now, because you're smart people and you don't miss much. Here's what I'd like us to do for a little bit today is be introduced to 1863 as a turning point year in the Civil War. Now, we're going to be using this piece of paper that you see on the screen. You got this in class on Friday, so you already have this paper if you were in class. So if you weren't in class, you make sure you have one of these if you were in any of the community partnership events or sports or whatever was going on Friday. We're going to talk about these couple of things as big turning points in our Civil War, but we better back up and remind ourselves of why we need turning points. So let's go back to the Civil War started in April 1861, and we spent some time with Fort Sumter, where the first shots were actually fired. We also spent some time coloring. We know that the North and South are very different from each other, and so a lot of blue on this chart showing the North, the Union states, Pennsylvania, New York, Ohio, California, etc., have a lot of advantages. The Union strategy then is to use those advantages to win the war. So you may recall talking about the Anaconda Plan. How is the Union going to use all their railroads, their population, their money, their factories, all those things to end the war, well, as they hope, as quickly as possible? For Southerners, they're going to try to get help from a foreign country because they don't have the population, the money, the manufacturing, the men, the materials, any of that. So if you remember this from the other day, that led us to our strategies. Well, let me open our strategies here again quick. And I think I forgot to open that. So strategies are going to go like this. There we go, strategy sessions. I think this will look familiar to you. There we go. Strategy for the Union, their Anaconda Plan is to preserve the United States as one nation by capturing Richmond, Virginia, capturing the Mississippi River, blockading southern port cities. For the South, they want to become an independent country. They want to play defense as much as possible, and they want to get help from a foreign country. Now, in class on Friday, we were looking a little bit about how did that Anaconda Plan go the first couple of years of the war? How is the Union doing at accomplishing that plan? Well, they're struggling. Even though they have a lot of advantages, yes, they're winning a lot of battles along the Mississippi River, and they're capturing that. But many people consider that to be the JV team, not really the important part of the war as much as the war in the East, which is being fought mostly between Richmond, Virginia, and Washington, D.C., the two national capitals. Well, these are some big, embarrassing losses for that Union that should be really powerful, should be really strong, but they're just not getting the job done. Tying at Antietam, which should never have been a tie because Union officers had Confederate battle plans in their hands and still couldn't win decisively. So a lot of trouble for the Union side, but things are going to start to turn around, and part of the Battle of Vicksburg is a part of that. So here's where you need the paper that we started out with. There we go. That paper is this one. Turning point year in 1863. So there are 5 things. We'll put some notes on our paper that are big turning points that are going to start to turn the war in a different direction for the Union. January 1st, 1863, the Emancipation Proclamation is issued. Here's what I'd like you to put on your paper. Can you put on here, this is the official end of slavery in the rebelling states. Now, slavery was not one of the causes of the war at first. Well, by now, and by 1863, January 1st, it is. Abraham Lincoln signs the Emancipation Proclamation. That's a big word, but emancipation means freedom. You're freeing the slaves in the states that are in rebellion against the United States government. That's a big turning point in turning the war to be officially about the end of slavery. We spent a little bit of time with war in the West on Friday, and well, when the Union Army under General Grant captures Vicksburg, Mississippi, that's pretty much completing the Anaconda Plan on the Mississippi River. Well, it's one of our goals of the Anaconda Plan was to capture the Mississippi, and we pretty much have it by the time we take Vicksburg in June and early July 1863. But while that is all happening, there are big things going on in central Pennsylvania. So we'll spend some time on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday especially with looking at the Confederate invasion of our area, right here in central PA. June and July of 1863, the Confederates invade Pennsylvania, trying to bring this war to an end. General Lee knows his army doesn't have all the men and the money and the materials necessary to keep the war going on forever. And while he's been doing really well in the war in the East, he's not really any closer to winning it. So General Lee wants to move his Confederate Army of Northern Virginia into central Pennsylvania, find some good ground, make the Union Army come to him so he can beat it piece by piece by piece as it arrives. Well, on your paper, let's go ahead and put this on here. The Confederates will come to York, Pennsylvania. Yes, little old York, PA, not far from where I live. In fact, Confederate soldiers marched right past my house, pretty much, on the main road next to my house. And, well, York is faced with a tough choice. What should we do as the Confederates are coming? We don't have any army to defend ourselves. Well, we'll do that story in class on Tuesday. Wednesday, we'll do the Battle of Hanover. Yes, little old Hanover, PA. Where the Union forces are going to fight a cavalry battle against Confederate forces. It's going to be good for the Union side. We'll force those Confederates away, and they're going to miss most of the Battle of Gettysburg. The function of cavalry is to help the infantry know where the enemy is and what their strength is and all that. Well, the Confederates just don't have all the information they really ought to have about the Union Army at Gettysburg. This large monument is one we will definitely see when we go to Gettysburg. This is the Pennsylvania State Memorial. Depending on the weather and things, we may be up on this level, this observation deck level of the monument. And you can see a lot of the battlefield from there. So a really dramatic story about Gettysburg, and some of the way Gettysburg turns out is determined by how the Battle of Hanover turns out. The Battle of Gettysburg on July 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, 1863, a big Union win. From that point, General Lee's Confederate Army of Northern Virginia pretty much goes into a downward spiral for the next 20 months until they finally have to surrender. Gettysburg is by no means the end of the war. Probably the biggest battle in a lot of ways, in terms of soldiers fighting and length of time and huge numbers of casualties, but it's not the end. The Confederates are able to hang on for another almost 2 years. Two other things that are big turning points that I'd like you to put on your paper right now include the Battle of Fort Wagner in Charleston Harbor, South Carolina. The war started at Fort Sumter in Charleston Harbor. Well, the Union side decides they're going to take Fort Sumter back in the summer of 1863. African-American soldiers are for the first time ever allowed to go into combat as American soldiers. And that's going to be a really dramatic story, which we may see a little bit of video about this possibly next week. But there's a famous movie called Glory that has been made about the 54th Massachusetts Regiment, first African-American soldiers to go into combat. Finally, a big turning point in the war is November of 1863, when President Lincoln travels to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, 4.5 months after the battle, to help dedicate a cemetery to soldiers killed at Gettysburg. The picture is President Lincoln giving his speech known as the Gettysburg Address. Your learning part of that, you've worked on it earlier in this class period, cutting up little colorful pieces of paper and all that. And so the Gettysburg Address is where President Lincoln is laying out why we're going to keep fighting this war, as terrible as it is, and why we think it's important to preserve government of the people, by the people, and for the people. All right, so you've got a little bit of notes here about 5 events that we are going to spend some time with this week. So that's Gettysburg, 1863 as a turning point year, including the Emancipation Proclamation, the Civil War moving into central Pennsylvania, York and Hanover and Gettysburg, and in the Battle of Fort Wagner and the Gettysburg Address. All of those important things in moving us closer to the end of our Civil War, where things will start to go better for the Union side.